My name is Fatima Hassan. I'm a teaching fellow here at ITU. I've been here in various capacities for the last 3 years. Currently, I'm working here as a teaching fellow, which means that I teach undergrads and also supervise a few theses if I get the opportunity. And we also do a lot of sessions in this university on different topics, just to enhance students' minds. I would like to think that we're enhancing their minds, but it's literally just my profession, really.
So what is linguistics and literature?
So linguistics is the study of language. It tells you where a word comes from, उसकी etymology, उसके meaning, क्यों associate किया इसके साथ, the image behind that word. All those things come under linguistics. Whereas languages and literature usually deal with the study of language, so here is languages. With literature, you're dealing with what has already been written. So the written text is very important, stories, novels, even religious texts. All of these things play a really important role in forming literature of a certain area, a certain region, a certain country. And then with world literature, आप ज़्यादा global scale पे जा रहे हैं. We're talking about literature on a very broad scale, and that tells you about human history, the diversity on this planet, कि human thought कितनी diverse है और कितनी vast है. All of those things in country.
So what is the difference between creative and expository writing?
Creative writing is, again, it comes from your own expression of thought. तो अगर आपके पास कोई ideas आ रहे हैं, you have a novel in your head, for instance, that would be creative writing. You are expressing yourself any way you like. There's no one to tell you that this is right and wrong. Like you said earlier on, it is subjective. So I'm going to use that word as well, it is subjective. So it is more objective, it's more scientific, it's more to do with facts and figures and research. तो जबकि न्यूज़ रिपोर्ट्स होती हैं वो जनरली आती हैं इन एक्सपोजिटरी राइटिंग, लेकिन जबकि ऑप-एड पीसेस होते हैं जिसमें आप अपने तासुरात बताते हैं अबाउट समथिंग, अपनी फीलिंग्स बताते हैं किसी चीज़ के बारे में, अपनी ओपिनियन देते हैं किसी चीज़ के बारे में, दैट इज़ नॉन एक्सपोजिटरी राइटिंग. सो दैट्स द मेन डिफरेंस कि एक में आपकी थॉट्स वगैरह मैटर करती हैं, दूसरी में नहीं करती हैं.
So what about your education? Where did you do your graduation from and your masters?
So I did my bachelor's in English literature and languages from Pakistani University. Then I did my master's in critical and creative writing from University of Sussex. And then I came back, started teaching.
What is the scope of creative writing and what are the job opportunities for the graduates who graduate in the creative writings?
It's great if you have a book published, and it's great if you're already looking at different publishers and you have a poetry book or something that you want to publish and showcase it to the world. Normally यही चीज़ सब लोग करना चाहते हैं, which is why we take this degree forward. Again, you can go into teaching, you can go into any communication field, you can go into helping out with an NGO, becoming a program manager. All of those opportunities are open to you. A few years ago, we had an HR manager who had a degree in literature and then a master's in HR. So it doesn't limit you. If anything, आप इसके बाद भी बहुत कुछ कर सकते हैं. Some of my batchmates who were with me in literature, they turned to law in their as a side thing as well. कि हम जो वो papers दे देते हैं, let's see what happens. It's just another way to explore. In LUMS, they actually have combined literature and their law program together, and that's only because lawyers do have to look at texts a lot more in depth. And literature helps with that. तो जब आप किसी चीज़ को critically देख रहे होते हैं, ज़रूरी होता है कि आप उसको फिर analyze करें, properly पढ़ें, and literature generally helps with that. It also helps with writing and proofreading as well. तो आप editor भी बन सकते हैं, आप और चीज़ें भी कर सकते हैं. The world is open for you. It's not a closed field. Different trend on Instagram recently by connecting with other writers, and that is that there is a field which is called medical writing. Okay, they are students who have done their 4 years of MBBS. They are actually trained doctors, but they make their money by writing for pharmaceutical companies and for other medical practices. And they're making a lot of money doing just that. They are making more money than if they were actually practicing medicine in Pakistan. So for you to think कि उनके लिए अंग्रेजी important है, उनके लिए writing style important है, उनके लिए blogging important है, they're making their money through that one thing. अब तो it's so difficult to even think about what profession to take up because there's so many possibilities now in the same field. I don't think you should regret any decision, whether it's literature, whether it's engineering, whether it's being a doctor. बाद में you can just combine all of these together. Another very important example in this would be if someone wants to make their own videos on YouTube and make a living from that, is Ali Abdal. He went to Cambridge University and he's a doctor. He left everything just to run a YouTube channel, which is making him a lot more money. So he talks about productivity, how to study, the different books that have changed his life. He talks about all of those factors that have changed his way of thinking, and that's his YouTube channel. So if you look him up, you will see that it's very helpful for students. Particularly, I recommend him to all my students because it helps them with studying and productivity and managing their homes, their homework, their assignments, their university workload and their extracurricular activities. क्योंकि ये सारी चीज़ें ज़रूरी होती हैं यूनिवर्सिटी लाइफ में.
What is the difference in the educational field, in the university, in the institutes between Pakistan and abroad who teach creative writing?
I don't know any university that only focuses on creative writing in Pakistan, because in my university and also in a few other liberal universities, creative writing is an elective that is offered on a very large scale. But it's not really a degree over here. We don't really have a BA Honours or a Master's program which only caters to creative writing. So it's something that we have put on the back bench for now. We prefer to study literature and then go into creative writing. We prefer to study philosophy and then go into creative writing. And in some ways that is the right approach. Because to think creative writing is just making a portfolio and writing is not true. You do have to study a lot, even a creative writing degree abroad. Also, if someone's going for this field, they should do their research क्या किस कौन सी यूनिवर्सिटी उनको सूट करती है. University of Sussex was the only university to offer critical and creative writing. So I chose that because it was number one, the only one. Number two, it was open to other ways of exploring literature and philosophy and creative writing. तो creative writing तो मैंने बहुत कम पढ़ी थी, मैं ज़्यादा philosophy और literature ही पढ़ा था उधर, and that really did help us in understanding the thought behind writing.
What is the difference between job opportunities here in Pakistan and abroad?
I wouldn't know too much about what is happening abroad after these degrees because they do have more scope. बाहर तो PhDs भी हो रही हैं creative writing के अंदर, and currently there are these 3-4 universities in the UK that are only hiring assistant professors in creative writing for their universities. Although I'm sure scope ज़्यादा है because if they're looking for assistant professors to teach creative writing, then of course you have job opportunities open over there. यहाँ पे it's, I would say, a bit more limited, but it's not too closed. We have found a way to merge creative writing with other fields. The few people that I know जिन्होंने बाहर से creative writing पढ़ के आए हैं, they have opened their own publications, they have opened their own publishing houses, they are doing a lot more to inculcate literature in our culture.
Do you think that creative writing should be taught at a primary level or at a school level to our students in Pakistan?
Absolutely. That is the best way to actually learn about how a child really thinks. From an adult perspective, मुझे बहुत इंटरेस्ट करता है कि बच्चे कैसे सोचते हैं. So for me, it should be taught just so I know exactly what's going on in a 4, 5, 6-year-old's mind. It's also very interesting how they phrase words. The way a 4-year-old talks about certain things, क्योंकि उनके पास लफ्ज़ नहीं होते, they come up with these really poetic, interesting phrases. And that for me is very interesting. At the same time, do not limit your child's education or their thinking by just telling them to focus on creative writing or English or math or science. Let them explore all of these subjects so that they know what they would actually like to do. With children, it's easier to teach them creative writing because by default, children are very creative. So if a child writes a story, it's full of surprises, it's full of elements which an adult would not think about. Like someone, like a flying toad for instance or something. And I do remember कि मैंने बहुत साल पहले, this was in my undergrad, I was interning at a summer camp और उधर मैंने creative writing की classes ली थी. And one of my, I would think he was 7 years old. This one student of mine, he came up with this robot that runs on petrol, has 3 legs, and it can do like multiple tasks. वो चीज़ एक adult शायद उस तरह से नहीं देखेगा, but that student actually wanted to write about a robot with 3 legs and was like a tripod and ran on fuel and everything else and operated like a human being. तो बच्चों की vocabulary कम limited होती है at that age, but at the same time their ideas are phenomenal and very vast. We can learn a lot from them. Again, literature has also led to the inventions of multiple devices that we use nowadays. Submarine did not come into existence until after it was written about. It was Jules Verne's novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, जिसमें submarine पहली दफ़ा इस्तेमाल हुई थी as an idea, and he basically talked about this one vehicle that goes underwater and you can actually go deep into the earth's crust to understand what's going on under the sea. You didn't have a submarine at that moment, but that idea was there. So I think it's very important to explore and to keep your creativity going. A student who has learned creative writing in their younger years will probably adapt to critical challenges and critical thinking more. And they'll probably try to solve their own problems their way. Whereas somebody who's only being told what to do will only always be told what to do. So leaders, on the other hand, they have to think creatively all the time. I mean, MacBooks, Windows 98, shuru jahan se hua, and then now today you have Windows 10. All of these things require creativity. Any to nahi cheezein banti hain, I would say. So it is important to also explore your mind in that way.
तो what methodology, considering कि पाकिस्तान में इतने ज़्यादा नहीं इस पे काम हो रहा, इतना एजुकेशन इंस्टीट्यूट्स में भी नहीं है, जॉब अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ भी उसी वजह से नहीं है, तो अगर हम if I ask you to suggest a few methodologies, a few steps that can improve this scenario, this status quo, so what would that be?
So it's something which I think we need to think about and really get together and focus on primary education, especially कि उसके अंदर क्या कुछ हो रहा है. In higher education, it's a little bit more different. We do give students more leverage, no matter what field they're taking. They do have more leverage to learn on their own. We do promote more self-study as well. School level पे self-study हो नहीं सकती. So we actually have to make the curriculum for them and devise methodologies of teaching them exactly that material, जो कुछ भी हो वो. तो उधर तो it's a little bit more different. However, in universities, you have, like I think I already said this, you have more leverage to focus on different ways of learning and different ways of teaching as well. School level पे it's a bit more, I think, based on principles. तो उधर की methodologies थोड़ी different होती हैं. Having more textbooks on creative writing, having more teachers who are trained in letting students express themselves is very important. Because creative writing के अंदर एक चीज़ है. In expository writing आपने मुझे पहले पूछा था, expository writing के अंदर you can easily tell a student के नया पैराग्राफ कहाँ से कहाँ शुरू हो रहा है. In creative writing, it's not that language based. You cannot tell them कि ये नया पैराग्राफ यहाँ से शुरू होता है आपका. It is much more to do with themselves. और again इसके अंदर भी there's so many different ways of exploring your own creativity and your own ideas. किसी में थोड़ी सी ज़्यादा I would say open-ended होगी. But again devise करना ज़रूरी है. It's not something that you can just be like कि नहीं आप जो करना है कर लें. It's important to devise that methodology, and we should look at different ways of how it's being taught in other parts of the world and adopt some of those methodologies in our own curriculum as well.
Okay, so say for example, someone likes to write anything like a prose or poetry, a piece of poetry. Can anyone be a poet?
I think so. I mean, Instagram तो कहता है कि yes, वो जो self-publish अपनी poetry कर रहे हैं. I don't think there should be any limits to creativity. However, I do feel like जो लोग बहुत कम लिखते हैं या जिन लोगों को बस शौक है, पढ़ा नहीं है ज़्यादा, उनकी क्वालिटी में कुछ चीज़ें रह जाती हैं शायद. Where somebody who has learnt more about art forms and poetic forms and even ghazal किस तरह से लिखते हैं will know much more about it. There is something to do with writing and it adding to our human experiences. When I teach writing, whether it's expository or creative, I always link it to something that I read in my own undergrad, which was it's like a necklace, it's like a string of pearls. हर paragraph एक pearl है और जब आप उसको एक साथ जोड़ते हैं you make a necklace. So this paragraph should have its own significance, but also it should make sense and form a whole stream of ideas or about any special feeling that you have. It should also flow into that like you make jewelry or like you decorate a room or like you decorate anything in your life. It is a lot like that. So if somebody can write well, it shows compared to somebody who is just new to it and is just dabbling with the idea कि ये तो बस शौक है, वैसे ही लिख लेते हैं, पढ़ा कुछ नहीं है. But again, it shouldn't be limited. दोनों अपनी तरह से बिल्कुल ठीक है.
Which genre is your favorite?
There's one thing that I've always leaned more towards, and that is surrealism. क्योंकि वो मेरा bachelor's का thesis था. So I wrote on surrealism, and so again that's something that's very interesting and very dear to me because it was my own thesis. So this is something I like to read as well, extreme of consciousness or like surrealism. But again, you can just start from anywhere, like pick up any novel, read it. खुद ही आपका interest build up हो जाएगा, then you can decide what you like to read. you.
So what is the difference between language and linguistics?
So language, or the study of language, is actually linguistics. Linguistics, it deals with phonetics, the idea behind a word, its etymology, all of those things. Whereas literature or other forms of languages deals with how you express yourself, or how you talk about your feelings or your ideas, or even the idea of storytelling and all. There is a reason why we have everything written down, and that is all literature. So anything that's written down and is a work of fiction or non-fiction, is a written word, could even be the Bible or any holy book, that is generally literature.
So do you think that modern technology is making human minds more sluggish and not creative?
It could in the future, I think. Abhi nahi, it's too soon to tell, but with ChatGPT and all, I do think that we are leaning towards an idea that maybe our creativity will have a full stop and machines will take over. But for now, I don't think so. And these tools are there to help us. They're supposed to make us more effective, more efficient, more productive. So use it in those methods, I would say, rather than focusing on your own creativity or making yourself rely on them. Take help from them, but don't rely on them. Rely on your own selves, ताकि आपका अपना दिमाग भी चलता रहे.
What is the reason that students these days are not creative writers or thinkers?
I think it's because खुद हमने एक तो रोल अपना अदा नहीं किया as adults, I would say, or their parents or their grandparents. I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying we did not really let them think for themselves. We like to think for our students and for our children. If we stop doing that, and if they take more control and explore and become more curious about life generally, they'll probably be more creative. हम जब बच्चों को रोकते हैं कि नहीं बाहर नहीं जाना, नहीं खेलना, we're looking from a very security perspective कि इनको कुछ हो ना जाए. But if you're there to supervise, and if they're playing in the garden, they'll come up with so many ways of explaining things that they're seeing. कोई ladybug नज़र आ गई, कोई butterfly नज़र आ गई, वो तो खुश हो जाते हैं. These kind of experiences do make children particularly more creative, and as they grow up, they take those experiences with them. And if you tell them too much कि आपने ये करना है, ये नहीं करना, if you dictate too much, they stop thinking for themselves. जब आप ज़्यादा strict हो जाते हैं as parents as well, like oh you can't walk with your friends and all. Yes, it's a good thing in some ways कि आप उनको protect कर रहे हैं, but again they then become very safe in their own environment, और वो comfort zone से बाहर निकलते नहीं. So it's good to let them explore and go out. They will eventually pick up more creative methods of thinking on their own.
So a few tips and tricks for students and writers out there.
Oh, so I wrote a blog on this I think a year ago for another magazine in Africa, which was to do with how to become more creative and how to enhance your writing. And some of my tips was if you're feeling really bored and you can't find inspiration, go for a walk. This is something that even leaders say कि जब आप अपनी organization run कर रहे हैं, so even for entrepreneurs, even for engineers, even for scientists, if you are unable to think about something after a certain period of time, अगर आपके पास बहुत आपने काम कर लिया चीज़ के ऊपर, बहुत research कर ली है, आगे नहीं सोचा जा रहा, go for a walk. Number one is that thing. Number two, watch movies. People think that watching movies is not something creative, and again I thought it wasn't either until I realized कि no, movies do open our minds to different ideas. जब आप देख रहे होते हैं मूवी, क्रिटिकली देख रहे होते हैं मूवी को, you do think कि अगर ये ना होता कुछ और हो सकता था इसकी बजाय, किसी और कोई और डायलॉग भी बोला जा सकता था इस पॉइंट पर. When you think of it in that way, you start enhancing your own thinking. You start picking out on what can be improved in a certain work of literature or a certain work of media. Those things then can help you with your own writing. Again, reading a lot. There's no escape to it. जितना आप पढ़ेंगे उतना आपके expressions बेहतर हो जाएंगे, आपका craft बेहतर हो जाएगा, आपके ideas बेहतर आएंगे आपको. So those things need to be then taken up. But again, cold baths, which लोग कहते हैं, they really help. So if you're taking a cold shower, you are basically more inspired. For me, I take very long hot baths, so that really helps me. Again, हर किसी का अपना process होता है. So maybe find your own process. There was an artist. He would actually only write. So he was an artist and a writer. He would only write on an empty stomach. So he would write for long periods of time by not eating at all. आजकल भी हम लोग we are fasting and all, so right now would be a good time to actually write about certain ideas. and then some people say that they cannot write until they are full and their stomachs are full of something. हर किसी के अपने अपने आइडियाज़ होते हैं, अपनी अपनी थॉट प्रोसेसेस होती हैं, अपने अपने क्रिएटिव प्रोसेसेस होते हैं. तो फाइंड योर ओन क्रिएटिव प्रोसेस एंड वर्क ऑन जस्ट दैट एंड एनहांस इट. खुद ही चीज़ें आई थिंक विल. Thank you so much for actually interviewing me for this. I think it's actually very brilliant that you guys have taken that initiative forward. EdTech industry is something that has bloomed in the last few years. बहुत ज़्यादा लोग अब ऑनलाइन लर्निंग की तरफ भी आ रहे हैं. And we've also I've learned one more thing, which is that a lot of universities are offering short courses, including ITU. यहाँ पे भी short courses in creative writing का बल्कि शुरू होने वाला है April 10th को. So if anyone wants to enroll for it, please get in touch. At the same time, you have a lot of these sort of platforms coming out, and I think it's brilliant because learning should never stop. And what you guys are actually doing is brilliant because if someone feels like they've taken the wrong field in their undergrad or in their masters, आपको ज़रूरी नहीं कि आप उसके अंदर ही सारी ज़िंदगी गुजारें being miserable. Just change your field, and these edtech platforms are actually giving that idea forward. के take more courses, learn something new, and then change your careers if you have to. बहुत सारे लोगों को 40 साल तक क्यों में पता नहीं चलता कि उन्होंने क्या सीखना है, क्या करना है ज़िंदगी में. And we sort of make it feel like it's a failure, but it's not, because a human mind is supposed to explore. If someone who has learned very late in life कि उनको क्या करना चाहिए था सारी ज़िंदगी, that doesn't mean that they should just stop and not do it and not focus on it. So I think that it's very important that we have more fields coming up which should be taught online, ताकि जो लोग चेंज करना चाहते हैं अपनी फील्ड वो तो कर सकें. They should have that option. Again, it's all about creating opportunities, and that's what you guys are doing. So I think that's brilliant.